Today is April the 6th, and today we will read about two disciples on the road to Emmaus, a village close to Jerusalem. What happened? Let's find out together. So in Luke chapter 24, Luke follows the same story of Jesus appearing to Mary in the garden that we read yesterday in the book of John. In verse 13 of Luke 24, that same day, two of Jesus' followers were walking to the village of Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. As they walked along, they were talking about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things, Jesus himself suddenly came and began walking with them. But God kept them from recognizing him. Very similar to what happened to Mary. Mary didn't recognize Jesus at first. These two began walking to Emmaus. Now, frankly, we don't even know where Emmaus is. Luke tells us here is about 7 miles away from Jerusalem. It's a long walk, but you can walk 7 miles in a day. It'll take you a couple of hours, but you can do it. We don't know where they were really going. They've tried to identify the village of Emmaus, but really the name changed or something, and today there is no village that is obviously Emmaus. We read on and we see that one of the disciples' names was Cleopas. We don't even know who Cleopas is, and the other disciple is unnamed. So we don't know where they were going. We don't know why they were going there. We don't know who they were. But it doesn't matter. Because it's what happens that's important. In verse 17, Jesus asked them, "What are you discussing so intently as you walk along?" They stopped, sadness written across their faces. Then one of them, Cleopas, replied, "You must be the only person in Jerusalem who hasn't heard about all the things that have happened here the last few days." "What things?" Jesus asked. They go on and they explain. Now you can read along in your text. I hope you have it open. We're not going to read all of it. Cleopas responds and he says, first of all, it's about Jesus. Jesus was first and foremost a prophet. He was a man who came to tell us what was happening in the world. That was the role of the prophet. The prophet would communicate from God a message to his people. Jesus was a prophet. He also did powerful miracles. Now, many of the prophets in the Old Testament did miracles, but none like Jesus. Jesus did some miracles that were unheard of before. Healing a man who had been blind from birth, restoring functionality to a man who was lame, raising the dead. Jesus did all of that. He was a mighty teacher. Now, typically prophets weren't teachers. The priests were teachers, and actually by Jesus' day, they actually had another class of religious leaders that were called teachers of the law. This may have been leaders of synagogues, people who had studied the law, and their purpose was to let people know what the law said. Then Cleopas continued on. He was crucified. He was killed. He was condemned to death, crucified, and then buried. Verse 21. We had hoped he was the Messiah who had come to rescue Israel. This all happened 3 days ago. There was desperation in Cleopas' voice. We had hoped he was the Messiah, but apparently not. But then Cleopas goes on and he says, but some women went to see Jesus at the tomb again to weep over his body. And they came back to us saying that the body was no longer there, that he's been raised from the dead. Now these two were leaving Jerusalem with that news. Now think about it. It was the end of Passover. The Sabbath was now over. This was the first day of the week. This was Monday. So they were probably going back to their village where they would go back to work. They've heard word of the loss of Jesus' body. The women say he must be resurrected. They probably think his body has been stolen and someone somewhere is desecrating his body, doing unthinkable things to the body. Verse 25, then Jesus said to them, dummies, you foolish people, do you find it so hard to believe all that the prophets wrote in the scriptures? Wasn't it clearly predicted that the Messiah would have to suffer all these things before entering his glory? And then Jesus took them through the writings of Moses and all the prophets, explaining from all the scriptures the things concerning himself. Jesus opened scriptures and tells them just what he had told them during his ministry. They come close to the village. Jesus pretended to go on in another direction. They said, no, please stay with us. It was getting late. They broke some bread, took the bread. Jesus accepted the bread from them, blessed it, broke it, and just as he had 4 nights before, handed it to them. And at that point, their eyes were opened. They recognized him. And immediately, he disappeared. Now, in verse 32, they said to each other, didn't our hearts burn within us as he talked with us on the road and explained the scriptures to us? Within the hour, they were on their way back to Jerusalem. They just walked 7 miles. They walked the 7 miles back to Jerusalem. There they found the 11 disciples and the others who had gathered with them, who said, the Lord is really risen. He appeared to Peter. Now, we don't have the story of Jesus' appearance to Peter. Luke talks about it here. The disciples mentioned that to the 2 who came back. It's actually recorded in 1 Corinthians 15 as the first appearance after the women at the tomb. Jesus appeared to Peter. We have no idea what happened in that appearance. What we do know is that they were now convinced. Jesus had risen from the dead. And what happens next changes not only their lives, but the entire world. Please like, follow, or subscribe on whatever platform you used to listen to this devotional. If you have questions for us, email us at questions@becomehope.com. Tomorrow, the story continues, and Jesus appears to the 10 who are in the upper room.